Welcome to the Lord and Richards Show, a program that will enable you to become more financially independent and prosperous from a biblical point of view. Tune in each week to learn how to prosper through good markets and bad. Now, here's our co-hosts, Colin Richards, your biblical investment advisor, and Dylan Schoonover.
Greetings, folks. I'm Dylan Schoonover. This is Colin Richards, CEO and founder of Lord and Richards, and you're joining us here on the Lord and Richards Show. Colin, when I go on vacation on the beach, what do you think of?
Usually don't get fried.
I think of skin cancer. And you know when I think of skin cancer, I think of healthcare. And that brings us to our topic today, healthcare. Oftentimes we need freedom of health to be able to enjoy our life. Whether we're young, old, anywhere in between, we've got to have freedom of health. If you don't have freedom of health, you can't really focus on the wealth and you can't really focus on your time, because all of your time and all of your money oftentimes are focused on your health. So, talk us through how we navigate having a freedom of health lifestyle to get us where we want to be in retirement.
Well, yeah, just as you said, there are three freedoms that Lord and Richards focuses in on when we're helping you develop that plan for retirement freedom as we describe it. And that is freedom of time, getting free from the job so you can enjoy being with those that you love, doing the things that you love, and achieving the higher purposes of our life and our existence, like love, relationship, family, and so forth. And then we have freedom of wealth, which helps fund all of that and also helps fund what we call freedom of health. And I've heard this expression probably put multiple ways, but someone has said, you know, when you're healthy, you have 1,000 desires, but when you're not healthy, you have but one. And I think it would be true most of us, if we were in a place physically that we couldn't enjoy our life, we would trade almost anything for that, including our wealth. And so we want to make that a priority. And it might seem a little odd not to have Dr. Oz or somebody else in the medical profession having this discussion, but it's a discussion that I found I've had so many times, and my team and I have had so many times with our clients, that it really is important to develop a plan to deal with health as we enter into retirement.
Yeah, I think when you ask those types of questions across the table, it opens up a lot of dialogue between the spouses, and you learn a lot in that process, right?
Oh yeah, I've had people tell me, you now know more about me than my own family knows. But sometimes it's great to just have that objective counselor sitting outside of your situation and able to help guide you and provide advice based on the interviews that we've conducted with thousands of people. I like to say that for all of us, when it comes to our own retirement, we get one shot at it. But at Lord and Richards, we've taken thousands of people through the process and have learned some things that can benefit each individual because of all those collective conversations.
That's great. Let's walk through them now. What's one of the key takeaways that people need to focus on in their health?
Well, I like to start with being proactive in our healthcare. So we have those things that up front we can be doing to help ward off future problems, to deal with things in advance before they ever become a problem for us. And this is a conversation not just for older people who might be retired, but it's also for younger people. It's about being proactive, not just reactive, and investing in our health. And when it comes to our health, there are a couple of key ingredients. One of those that is often neglected is the area of sleep. And studies have shown that as a result of sleep problems, and this afflicts much of the population, I've experienced it at different times in my life, as a result of sleep problems, we begin to build the foundation of future mental cognitive decline. And to me, that's one of the scariest things. You know, put me in a wheelchair, but don't let me lose my mind. Although my wife has already said it's happened. Just because I forget where the keys is.
Oh, I thought you meant your wife made you lose your mind.
No. But you know, sleep is actually one of those things that if you're getting great quality sleep, it's protective against situations like that. So that's just one example of several of how you can be proactive and setting an environment that's conducive to sleep, a darker room. I think you told me recently you stayed somewhere with a bright window in it, right?
Yes.
So we need to address that in our home. We can't always control the circumstances when we're traveling, but darker room, cooler temperatures, minimal distractions before we go to bed, like watching TV programming or being exposed to certain frequencies of light. All those things can help us enjoy a better night's sleep, not only wake up refreshed now, but we can plan on building the foundation of a great mental health in the future as a result.
And a lot of times, are you seeing folks, are they proactive in going to the doctor for the physical, or are they unwilling to do that? Or is it like, well, I'll get around to that? Is it a male-female divide? What are you seeing there?
I think the biggest problem is our medical system as it's set up now here in America is primarily about being reactive rather than proactive. And so most people are coming to the doctor, the physician, the medical professional to get help when something goes wrong. And so what we really want to do is involve professionals in our lives while things are still good and improve on that foundation. It's never too late to start this, but I've been really proud of my dad, especially lately. He has begun to make changes in his diet, in his lifestyle patterns, in his exercise patterns. And a lot of it was just because I said, hey, we're going to take a trip next year together, and he wants to be able to keep up with the rest of us.
Yeah. So you almost guilt-tripped him into it a little bit.
Pretty much. He's listening to this, so Dad, I'm proud of you.
There we go. It's kind of the same concept of the fact that, people will, pray to God when they need something, not necessarily in a when times are good situation.
Yeah, like the old adage goes, there's no atheists in the foxhole, right?
Yes, that would be the concept. Talk about it from a more practical investment perspective. So when you're investing, I think we can get into this a little bit, LTC, long-term care. People hear a lot about that. Some people are like, oh, you need it. Others are like, no, you don't need it. Some are like, there's parameters if you need it. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on that, and maybe even if there's alternatives to that.
Well, the best, again, approach is preventative. And so before we ever get to the stage where we're going to have to shell out potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's the real cost. Today, Americans are going to spend in excess of $114,000 per year per person on average. And there's a 70% likelihood that people are going to go through this. A married couple, at least one of them is going to go through a long-term care situation. Long-term care means that you are going to be in a position where you can't perform 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. Things like being able to feed yourself, being able to dress yourself, and so on. And that also includes cognitive function. So your physician makes a judgment call. If you've arrived at that place where you can't do 2 of those, you now qualify as being chronically ill or needing long-term care. We don't want to be in that position because you have to pay for that out of your own pocket. Your health care, your disability policies, things like this, aren't going to continue to pay past 90 days. And unfortunately, the government isn't going to pick up the tab either. The government will only pick up the tab when you've wiped out all but the smallest amount of assets. In essence, Medicaid, not Medicare, kicks in when you have been made poor. So it's Medicaid. We don't want to be on Medicaid. We want to be self-sufficient. We want to have assets that we can leave behind for those that we love. We don't want to bankrupt our spouse because of our health care. So again, being proactive about this and planning in advance is vital. This is one of those, I think it's even more important than estate planning, that we don't just kick this can down the road.
Yeah, I would agree with you. The good news is, though, the $114,000 sounds like a really difficult number, but the cheapest state, if you all want to move, you can go to Louisiana. They're getting a deal there. I think you're more around $100,000 in Louisiana.
Okay, so. Yeah, let's all move down to the bayou.
When we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about some of the pros and the cons of long-term care and potentially some of the alternatives that may be a better fit for you.
You're watching The Lord and Richards Show, a program that can help you become more financially independent. Tune in to learn how you could become prosperous during good times and bad.
Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. That's 720-372-0400 for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Or check us out online at lordandrichards.com.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us all out there in the radio or listening world online. We are looking forward to talking more about healthcare. Colin, long-term care is what we talked about before the break and how we were going to talk about some of the pitfalls or the positives of it right now. Give me some things around it, when it could be used, when you wouldn't recommend using it, and just kind of highlight the good, the bad, and where it all falls.
Well, the worst thing to do, again, would be to ignore it. People say funny things to me in appointments like, I'll just take a long walk before it ever gets to that. Nobody wants to go through this. Nobody wants to be in a nursing home. If we are chronically ill, I think the desire is to be at home, to be with those that we love in surroundings that are familiar to us. But again, we all want to avoid this. But sticking our head in the sand is not the best option. And so then it comes to, well, when this happens, because it is likely to happen, how do we fund it? How do we make sure we don't bankrupt those that we leave behind, especially our spouse? And waiting to plan on Medicaid means that your spouse, the well spouse as we call it, who outlives you may well have almost nothing to live on besides Social Security. So paying for long-term care is the real issue. And the gold, the Cadillac solution is long-term care insurance. Now, to be honest with you, I haven't placed a lot of people personally in long-term care insurance, although it is the gold standard. The problem is most policies that you'll come across are what we call use it or lose it. And it just feels like, kind of like your homeowners or other insurance, I'm just throwing money down the toilet, and the only reason this would ever be good is if I was in a bad situation. So something we don't like to do. Nothing wrong with it, and if you've got a great long-term care policy, or at least you think it is, let us review it. And if it's solid, we'll encourage you to keep it as long as you can afford it. But traditional long-term care a lot of times goes up in cost as we specifically need it, and a lot of times those premiums can get out of hand. So we need some alternatives to the traditional long-term care picture.
Right, because they can move the goalposts on you basically, and not you as a person individually, but in your class of human, they can say, you're either going to go up or you're going to lose some of the benefits, right?
Exactly. People are faced with the hard choice of, do I remove the inflation protection? And long-term care costs are going up at an extraordinary rate, double, triple average inflation. Or do I pay less and get lower benefits and so on? So it's a really tough decision. So for that reason, a lot of people say, well, Colin, my plan is to self-fund. The problem is if today, let's say, we're averaging 2.5 to 4 years and costs are about $114,000, you can see, wow, that's a big number. So let's just round that off and say we've got $250,000 that we've set aside. All that money would be needed, but we don't know if we're going to be average or if we're going to need a longer stay. So self-funding can be a real challenge. What we'll do, if that's something you want to look into, is we'll develop a series of tests to see how well your portfolio could sustain that later in life. Don't forget though, with inflation, a person in their 60s today who's looking at a few $100,000 of potential costs is typically looking at more than $1 million of costs for the same amount of coverage and time in the future.
Yeah, and the way I understand it is that approximately 3.2 years is the average stay in a hospital bed when you're encountering those $100,000+ a room costs per year. And the way that I understand it from our advisors that you guys have taught is that really under $500,000, it's probably too expensive to fund. And if you have several $1 million, then maybe you could self-fund. But for a lot of clients that end up in that middle range, that's where they have to make the decision of, okay, do I spend this money? Because it may not be the best use of it. There's actually a hybrid solution that you find to be a much better option.
Yeah, because I remember having somebody come to me and he said, hey, Colin, we're getting about $250,000 in a legacy. My parents passed and left us the home and we're selling it. He said, I'd like to set that aside. And he said, should I just put that in a bank account? And I said, well, the problem with that, John, is that money is not going to keep up with inflation. And for all the reasons I just described, we need that money to grow. Oh, okay, Colin, so are you suggesting I put that in the market? Well, wait a minute, John, that's another problem, because right when you need it, what if we go through another one of those market downturns and half the money is gone? So in the middle sits something that I think can be a very valuable and useful tool. And this is what we call living benefits. So I've talked about life insurance. You've asked me about life insurance, which for some people is a dirty word because we don't want to think about a benefit somebody gets that requires us to die. Yeah. But there's such a thing as living benefits. And to deal with healthcare, to deal with the high cost of chronic care, I have yet to find a better solution that will bridge that gap and keep you from bankrupting your loved ones while still paying for your own costs. And the way it works is you can find a conservative platform, in other words, a type of life policy where you can drop in your cash, You can do it in this case even all at once. If the purpose is for you to be able to take that money out later for your own long-term care, what happens is the insurance company will sit on that money and grow it for you at hopefully a moderate rate of return, but it grows tax-free. But if you need long-term care, whether it's 2 years after you do this, so I told John, let's drop this $250 into a life policy. They gave him in his 60s about a $900,000 death benefit. You say, well, I got to be dead to enjoy that, right? So that's not very enjoyable. No, if you cannot perform 2 activities of daily living, like feeding yourself, dressing yourself, or you have cognitive decline as attested to by a physician, that insurance company will allow you to take the death benefit tax-free, pull it out and back into your life, and your spouse can take those dollars and use it to provide for your care, and thereby protect all your other assets so your spouse is not bankrupted in the process.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it really is a big deal. And I've got to say that when I do public presentations of all the things I talk about, taxes, estate planning, markets, investments, this is the one that gets people's attention because they've almost never heard about it.
Yeah, I think that would make it a big impact on a large percentage of retirees and, basically mitigate some of the burdens that they were facing of really high healthcare expenses.
Yeah, now it still might seem like a high barrier to entry. You say, well, Colin, that person had $250,000. I don't have $250,000. Well, we can also do this gradually over time. So I had a client years ago who was taking a pension, but he didn't need all of it. So we took the money after it was taxed, dropped it in month by month by month. He's still doing it. And we're able to essentially fund a very similar policy for him. And if your needs change, you can take that money out of that policy and use it for other things that may come up that, might require you to do that earlier than, say, getting sick.
That's great. So how does someone listening or watching this right now get more information from Lord and Richards to be able to understand exactly how to utilize this?
Well, this is going to start with what we call the Retirement Freedom Review. This is your chance to sit down and explore the 3 freedoms we've been talking about: freedom of time, freedom of health, freedom of money. And we're going to diagnose your portfolio between our first and second visit to determine how well situated are you to deal with things like the high cost of chronic illness. And then we're going to propose solutions to you in that next visit that hopefully are going to give you hope. It's going to give you a sense of great relief that these high costs that afflict so many people are something that you can deal with in advance.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to come back from the break. When we do that, we're going to continue talking about freedom of health and the ways that you can be proactive to make sure that your health lasts for as long as you do. We'll see you soon.
You're watching The Lord and Richards Show, a program that can help you become more financially independent. Tune in to learn how you could become prosperous during good times and bad.
Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. That's 720-372-0400 for your complimentary Retirement Freedom Review. Or check us out online at lordandrichards.com.
Welcome back to the Lord and Richards Show. Colin Richards, CEO and founder, joining us now. Very excited to have a little bit more information from you in this last segment, talking about things where we can be more active to be proactive with our health so that we get the most out of our retirement. We talked about sleep in the first segment. We talked about a solution for your health in the second segment. Bring us back around here in the third segment about what it is that we can be doing.
Yeah, so we have proactive health care while we're healthy. We have reactive health care when we get sick. And that really is divided into 2 areas: acute things that are covered by your insurance policy, right? I stubbed my toe, or, I broke a limb or whatever. Those are acute, means it's happening right now. But then we have a separate area that's chronic, where we talked about in our last segment, things that can go on for months or even years. Long before we ever get to the chronic phase, what we want to do is build those building blocks, as I described it, towards a solid foundation of health to try to avoid acute injuries as well as chronic illness. And we talk about sleep, but when we move past sleep, it's not good to just be a retiree that sleeps all the time, right? Hopefully a good portion of our day we're awake and we're alert. And so now we get into other areas like diet and exercise. And I don't want to beat the dead horse. I know, for example, probably for most of our clients, their kids are talking to them about this. But science has begun to reveal that the old idea of sitting in a chair, we've got enough data to show that you are going to decrease your life expectancy if that's your vision of retirement. So the idea of an active retirement that begins long before you retire is important. So one of the physical foundations that we need is to invest in our own fitness. For me, this has become an ever greater priority. As I studied it and learned this for my clients, I realized, hey, I need to put this in place. So most people should be working out. That looks different for a young guy that's an athlete in his 20s versus somebody that's 70 years old. But we should be spending time multiple times per week exercising our heart and our cardiovascular system. But also, and here's a neglected one, we've learned that the biggest predictor of all-cause mortality for any reason in old age is a lack of muscle tissue. It's called sarcopenia. And you don't have to be a power lifter. I think women especially get in their mind the idea of the muscle-bound woman, but to protect and to potentially build the muscle in your body has become a very vital, important feature of proactive medical care.
Right, because it basically goes away faster the older you get, right? It's harder to maintain it.
We're losing about 10% per decade after our 20s. So Dylan, at this point, you're about 20% down, unless you've done something vitally important, which is to build and continue to exercise, which I know you
Well,
did.
that was slightly depressing, Colin. But thank you for highlighting that for me. And on your case, you're at,
no, we won't be counting that, yeah. But imagine though, if that's been happening, by the time we're 80, we could have lost as much as 50% of our muscle mass if we've not been proactive in protecting that.
Yeah, that would be significant. And that's probably why you see a lot of people in rehab facilities. You see a lot of falls. They can't sustain because their body doesn't have the same strength that it did at one point when they were younger.
Right. And that's where diet comes into play, because now we want to add to that conditioning type work. We want to add a diet that supports it. We all know, we've known for decades that the American diet is pretty unhealthy and leads to the wrong kind of growth in our body, usually fat growth. It's okay to be a little overweight from a mortality standpoint. You're in far worse shape if you don't have muscle than if you've got a little extra fat. Now, I'm not encouraging everybody to go out and turn into marshmallows, but what I am saying is eat a diet that is rich in protein, that helps support the growth of muscle mass. We've learned that, we probably need more than the recommended daily allowance, but even then, most people are not getting the recommended daily allowance of protein. People say, well, I have an egg in the morning. Well, there you go. You got 7 grams of potentially 60 to 100 grams that you're going to need to support your muscle mass. So you're going to need to do a lot better than that.
Do you see a trend that's going to do anything to support a reversal of some of the numbers we talked about in the second segment of how long people spend in a facility? Because obviously, I think it's common sense or commonplace that if you exercise and you eat well and you keep your body strength up, you're probably going to be less likely to have a long-term care event. But do you see any data to support that Americans are taking this into consideration at all?
Well, I don't have exact figures. I haven't gone that far, but what I will say is anecdotally, I see this rising in the minds of my clients, and I'm glad to be in a position to be able to talk about this with them and in public as we're doing now, because I think there's started to be a shift in the medical profession, because let's face it, seeing the doctor has been all about fixing things. And prevention has been, well, eat right, as your doctor who may be overweight and smoking is telling you this, right? Well, doctors are starting to get on the front end, and I think that's a good sign. There's a great book by Tony Robbins called Life Force, and he talks about ways that you can begin to invest proactively in treatments and other things that are proactive that have been kind of out of reach for most people. Things like stem cell therapy are starting to come online, where instead of having to have complicated surgery on, say, a shoulder injury, or as my wife experienced with her knees, we can go in and have an injection. Those are starting to be covered, and maintain our mobility, because surgery recovery is a setback, right? Yeah. But if I can just keep going while I'm doing this and maybe just have a few days recovery as opposed to weeks, that allows me to continue to build and build and build right through the older years of my life.
Yeah, so an ounce of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
Absolutely. Unless you're losing weight, and then it's maybe half a pound.
Half a pound. Well, thank you for the insight, Colin. And if you have any questions regarding your health, regarding the hybrid insurance solution, any questions you may have for Lord & Richards, you can give us a call or you can visit us online at lordandrichards.com. Until next time, we'll see you soon.
Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. That's 720-372-0400 for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Or check us out online at lordandrichards.com.
Take the first step toward securing your financial future. Request an appointment today. Whether you're planning for retirement, managing your wealth, or optimizing your business finances, we're ready to help you achieve your goals. Visit us online at lordandrichards.com for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Investment advisory services offered through Lord & Richards Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor.